I'm 2 weeks away from defending.
Right.
I'm 6 weeks away from getting married, and then 2 months from starting my postdoc position. So it'll be an exciting few months.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Next Step. I'm Jeff Kozlowski, your host. For this episode, we welcome Maddie Jensen. She is a PhD trainee in biochemistry and molecular biology in Eric Wagner's lab here at SMD. At the time we recorded this, she was just 2 weeks out from defending her thesis and had recently accepted a postdoc role at UT Southwestern in Texas. So the focus of our conversation really was all about finding the right fit for that postdoc position, how she went about the search process, taking into consideration, not only her career, but also her family and where they sort of saw themselves in the future. We also talked about prepping for her thesis defense as it was so close. She's also getting married in the next few weeks as we recorded this anyway. So a lot going on in Maddie's life, a lot of exciting things that we talk all about. We also talk about some resources she took advantage of while she was in graduate school to sort of help set her up for the job search. I think if you're interested in pursuing a postdoc and are interested in what the process looks like and navigating potential multiple options, you'll enjoy this one. Maddie Jensen, thank you so much for joining The Next Step. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. I appreciate you taking the time to join us. Before we jump into the hard stuff, I guess we have to ask. You're not that far away from getting married, right?
Right. Yes.
Right.
So I
As we
defend.
record this, as of like this recording, how far are we away?
So I'm 2 weeks away from defending.
Right.
I'm 6 weeks away from getting married, and then 2 months from starting my postdoc position. So it'll be an exciting few months.
Exciting times for sure. Well, early congratulations to
Thank
you
you.
and your fiance, and of course to you on everything you have coming up. So, I'd love to start just by talking about where your interest in science comes from.
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, I honestly think I was into science from a really young age, which is so funny. I didn't think that I wanted to be a scientist, but um, I had like a bathroom lab as a kid, which is so nerdy. And my parents would buy me like different measuring spoons and stuff like that that I could use. But I think it really was mentors in high school that were like, you really enjoy this chemistry lab. Like, did you know that research was a job? And so it was really them that kind of introduced me to the idea of scientific research and kind of showed me that I enjoyed it. So very thankful for them doing that.
That's interesting. Yeah, we have quite a few alums that come on here and say, like, they had all intentions of going to medical school and being a doctor, or they had started medical school and quickly realized that wasn't for them and they liked research more, but you kind of knew very early on before you
Yes,
started
surprisingly.
undergrad. Yeah, that's great. So you had kind of an interesting path to Rochester, right? Where did you talk about that journey? Because, I know you had kind of started your PhD somewhere else and then picked up and moved to Rochester mid grad school journey. So
Yes.
can you tell us that story?
Yeah, so I'm originally from Texas and I started my PhD down there, and I found a lab that was a really great fit. The mentor and I got along well. I really enjoyed the project, enjoyed the lab environment. So I joined the lab, and then at the end of my first year, um, my PI got a job offer from the University of Rochester and decided to move the lab. And I didn't have to, but decided to come. Um, at that point, I knew I was really interested in RNA and wanted to go in that direction. And so that's how I ended up at Rochester. And it's been really good for me. I have enjoyed it so much.
Yeah, so you are in the lab of Eric Wagner, and being in the RNA world, Eric was recently named AAAS fellow. You're likely working with or around Lynn McQuat, founding director of the Center for RNA Biology here at U of R, world renowned in her field. What has that experience been like for you?
It has been so awesome. Lynn is actually on my thesis committee, and so she actually suggested to me the lab that I will be doing my postdoc in. So she is good friends with my future PI. And so it's been really great to get to work with both of them and work with them together in the science realm, but even, like Lynn doing GWiz, and I got to, kind of share what we'll be talking about today there. So it's been really great to learn from them, scientifically, but they've also been, not only advisors to me, but really mentors, which I've been very thankful for. So it's been great.
Yeah, and you got into the RNA world at a great time. It seems like, it's as Lynn likes to say, RNA used to be at the bottom of the agenda in meetings. Now it's the first thing on the agenda, and it's till, I think she says DNA is taking a back seat or something like
Yeah.
that. How, can you just talk about being in the RNA world, just from the science and work perspective that you're doing?
Yeah, it is really exciting. And I think it's a really exciting time to be a trainee and looking at a future career in RNA, hopefully. Um, and with where we sit now after the pandemic, it's exciting to get to talk to my family and friends. And, they have now heard of RNA, where before that they probably would not have. So there's much more, even though that's not really related to what I study, it's been a good kind of tool to use and being able to help explain and teach and things like that has been really fun. So I agree with Lynn. It is a good time to be starting to study RNA.
So let's talk about your work specifically. Can you just give us an idea of what your thesis is focusing on? And I've in doing a little bit of research ahead of this. I, looking back at old LinkedIn posts, I know you got to do some kind of exciting collaborations
Yeah.
during your time here at U of R. So can you share with us, the what you've been working on?
Yeah. So, um, broad level, we study transcription machinery, and there are two specific complexes in that process that I'm really interested in. Both of them are RNA, have an RNA endonuclease, which means it's a protein that can cut RNA. And so we have really been interested in how those two complexes are regulated, and specifically how, like looking at their similarities and comparing them and seeing how they're similar. And both of these complexes have connections to neurodevelopmental disorders. And so we've done some cool collaborations with the Purcell Lab, where they've generated knockout neural organoids, where we can look in a more cell type specific manner at, what do alterations in this complex cause throughout neuronal differentiation, which has been really cool. And now they're starting to look at some specific patient mutations so that, not only do we see like worst case phenotype, but we can actually start to parse apart, what might be happening during development in patients with these mutations.
Awesome. And so you mentioned, did you say 2 weeks till your thesis defense
Yes.
as we record this? Okay, so by the time it comes out, you will have hopefully been past that. So, and you'll be in the process of moving. So tell us what is next. I know you're prepping for a new postdoc role. Where
Mhm.
is that? What are you working on in that role?
Yeah, so my future postdoc will be at UT Southwestern in Dallas, in Josh Mendel's lab. I don't have a specific project yet,
Mm.
but their lab is very RNA focused. They look at translational regulation and things like that. So I'm excited. It'll be a bit of a pivot from what I'm doing now, no matter what, but I'm excited to get in there and see what my project ends up being.
So talk about the search process then, because I know it takes some time. There's, you kind of explored multiple options, had a couple different offers, right? And
Yes.
so, what anything you learned, as you kind of went through those different postdoc interviews that you could pass along to trainees that may be coming up in a position like that?
Absolutely. So I started the search, or like, yeah, I guess I'd call it the search process, 12 months before I wanted to start my position. Um, and one thing that I didn't expect from this application process is just how variable it can be from person to person or lab to lab. And so some people are like, wow, you're so early to the game with 12 months. Like, we have plenty of time. And then other people, thought I was right on track. And that will be a theme as throughout the conversation of everyone has a different perspective on this. Every PI that I talked to had a different perspective. So you kind of just have to be ready for anything. But mainly in July, I started really brainstorming labs that I knew of that I was interested in, and also talking to my fiance about, where would be good for you to be. So I made a list of, top science people. If location was not a factor at all, who would I want to work with? And my fiance did the same thing for his job. And we kind of compared those lists and then picked like our top two locations. And then I dove in from there. So I really, our top two cities we were looking at were Dallas and Boston. And so I found several labs in each of those places. And my different like mentors and faculty at U of R were really helpful in doing that. So another one of my thesis committee members is um, has spent a lot of time in Boston and worked
Mm.
there, so he was able to provide a lot of names and background information. So because we were limited to our location, I did a lot of work to really narrow down the list of people that I was interested in. Then kind of broad overview, I guess, of the timeline. So I started that in July, talked to mentors, made the list, started doing informational interviews with those people. Then in August, I was talking to my reference writers, making sure that they were prepped, drafting a cover letter. I sent that as emails to the PIs that I was interested in. And then they very quickly responded. We had initial Zoom meetings in September, October. I did in-person meeting or interviews in December and January, and then had offers sometime between December and February. So that's about how long it took. But it was nice to have that kind of done and squared away so that I could be writing my thesis and trying to finish up and things like that.
Yes, so starting early is a good idea, and you kind of hit on that. There's no one size fits all approach to these interviews. How do you prepare for something like that? You mentioned just kind of always staying ready, but how do you prepare when I guess you really kind of don't know what to expect if everybody is so different?
Yes. And it was hard. It felt hard to prepare like in the weeks leading up to it. But
Mhm.
as I was doing it, I was really thankful for the different opportunities that I have had over my grad school career to have similar type conversations. So in our department, we have the chance to get lunch with our visiting faculty speakers. And so, getting to kind of talk with them and figure out how do you kind of initiate a conversation about mentorship in addition to just talking about science. So things like that were really helpful. I had done What Can You Be with a PhD? And, just The practice of basically doing informational interviews with all different types of people probably proved to be the most helpful practice that I got. And the Zoom interviews were easier. The shortest one was like 15 minutes, and the longest one was an hour and a half.
Mm.
But then the in person interview days, I was with them for like 8 to 10 plus hours. And so it's also just a really long day. Um, so it takes some stamina, but it was fun. And, everyone is excited to meet you and excited to share about their science. So it was good, but it is challenging in certain ways.
Yeah, can you take us through an example of what one of those in-person days look like?
Yes. So again, everyone did it slightly differently. So there were I interviewed at 5 places in person, and 2 of them I showed up to their building, and, generally, in the mornings, I'd have, like, a brief meeting with the PI to answer any initial questions, get the overview of the day. At some point during the day, I gave an hour-long presentation on my grad school work to just their lab. And then the bulk of the day was meeting with lab members. And so the rest of the time was 30-minute to 1 hour chunks of time where I was just meeting with every person in their lab, which I honestly thought was very fun. And you get a really good like spectrum of, you get to hear from everyone, how they're feeling and what they're working on and stuff like that. So that was really fun. They took me out to lunch, and then about half of the labs took me out to dinner that evening as well. So,
Cool.
and then normally before we would go to dinner, the last meeting of the day would be an interview with the PI for an hour or so.
Hmm.
Um, and most of those were geared towards like what are my interests? Where do our scientific interests align? And then if I had any questions. And so I, tried to figure out what, questions about mentorship or their view of training that I wanted to ask, and then would kind of wrap up the conversation with those types of things.
And you mentioned that that this postdoc is a little bit of a pivot from what you're doing in your PhD work. W- What did you do? We hear that that's kind of a excuse me, uh, something that's come up a lot in the last couple interviews for this podcast, and advice that folks pass along is like not to stay so laser focused during your to get the most out of your grad school experience, because what your thesis work focuses on will likely not be a huge part of what you do in your job. What did you do throughout grad school to not be too laser focused on your thesis work?
I think that I was potentially too laser focused
Uh,
on my thesis work. Um, but I was also Eric did a really good job, I feel like, of encouraging me to also work on my soft skills. And he really took the approach of, you're not just here to do research on this one scientific topic, although that's what he's excited about and that's what
sure.
he paid me to do. Um, but he was also very intentional of helping me find places to give presentations and was supportive of me being involved in leadership on campus and doing career exploration things, meeting and networking with people um, in our field. So I feel like I was pretty focused on my one scientific topic, but the soft skill component is also important because we want to get a broad, training experience.
Yes, and I know we have various trainee affinity groups here at SMD, and yourself in particular, you were part of the Graduate Student Society,
Hmm.
president of that group for a time. What was that experience like? And talk about your time with the GSS, the kind of work you
Yeah.
guys did, and what you took from that.
Yeah, it was a good experience. It was challenging in many ways, I would say. But I enjoyed kind of getting to almost like see behind the curtain of what's actually going on, like in graduate education and with administrative types of things. Like I had no idea. I wouldn't have been able to even tell you who a lot of those people were. But it was really good to get to meet with them, and they were willing to work with us on the different issues that we were trying to address at the time. And so some of the like final ones that we did were trying to help improve like handicap accessibility for students and the
Mm.
shuttling system, um, providing like health and wellness products to grad students was another one. But and then really just getting to, I think, meet people across the university, of all stages and paths and all sorts of things was probably my biggest, takeaway and what I enjoyed most about it.
Grad school is challenging enough. Let MyHub give you a hand in planning your career and professional development. Need CV help? Grant writing tips? LinkedIn upgrade? We've got you covered. From one-on-one career coaching and writing support to wellness resources, mentorship, and fostering your professional network, MyHub is your partner every step of the way. Not sure who can help? That's what we're here for. We'll connect you with the right people and tools to move forward with confidence. You don't have to do this alone. Visit myhub.urmc.edu to learn more. That's awesome. I think, saw you at several Graduate Women in Science events, and you've had the opportunity to present on
Yeah.
this very topic not too long ago at a GWiz event, as they call it. What have you gotten out of attending those events and being part of that group during the last couple years?
Yeah. So, I have enjoyed GWiz so much, and I think it was really encouraging to get to hear so many different faculties' career stories, as well as, other topics that they are really passionate about. I'm looking
Because
forward.
these aren't faculty here. These are just
Right.
it's anybody that from any institution that has an interesting story, right?
Yes. Yeah, visiting faculty. And so I think it was really encouraging to hear a lot of those stories. At the same time, though, it was very intimidating
Mm.
because all of them have very unique, it's like I can't just pick that and follow it, because what if my PI doesn't move or, whatever their like weird thing was. It's like I can't just put myself in your shoes, my PI doesn't also do science communication stuff or anyway, those are broad examples. So it was encouraging but also a little bit intimidating that I have to do it for myself, and just kind of figure it out and know that, it'll be okay. I will end up somewhere and it'll be good. And if it ends up not being good and it's time to make a pivot, then we'll make a pivot when it's time. And that was, I think, a broad takeaway from many of those talks. There are hills and valleys. And when they were in a valley for too long, it was like, all right, we're going to make a change. And it's challenging to make a change, but it ends up being good. So it ebbs and flows, I guess. But definitely learned a lot from just even how they talked about the process of becoming a faculty member or finding their job in science communication or industry or whatever it was.
I love that. Couple takeaways from that, like you said, not one single career path or journey is the same. There might be similar strategies used along the way, but it all looks slightly different. And then I like the peaks and valleys and recognizing when you're in a valley for a little too long. Okay, maybe it is time to
Right.
make a change and not stay in this spot. So, as we record this, April 2025, rather uncertain times in the biomedical science world, health world, just in general. I guess, that might be, maybe that's the best way to describe it is uncertain times. And as you mentioned before we started recording, the process now for the job search process for current trainees may look a lot different than yours was less than a year ago or and just a few months ago. What would you say to those folks? And I know you talked a little bit about this in your presentation with GWiz a few weeks ago. What do you say to those folks that are thinking, what am I getting myself into?
Yeah. It is uncertain times, as we like to say. I will say I had not accepted my any offer yet when things kind of started
Mm,
to go crazy. And all of my offers still stood at the time that I accepted one at the beginning of March. And right now, my position is still okay. So we're gonna keep going until we can't go anymore. Um, I would like to think that, like science will go on. There's still great research going on out there. People want to hire great postdocs. Um, and so if there's something that you want to do, like be a postdoc, go for it, like do what you need to do to go for it, and do it until you can't do it anymore. And if you can't do it anymore, and then that's your valley, and you pivot and you figure out how to make it work. But I think there's still I know of other people applying to postdoc positions and they're still getting offers. And so it is challenging, and uncertain. I think the initial search process will likely be harder.
mhm.
Whereas when I reached out to people in August of 2024, everyone I reached out to was like, yeah, great. We'd love to have a postdoc interview. Now you might have to send out more cover letters, do more interviews, but I think that the process will still hold and that people are still wanting postdocs to come and help them do good research.
And as you prepared for your next step, and I know you likely met with your committee members and your mentors during that whole process, what sort of words of encouragement did they pass along to you as you went through all of this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think they, first of all, provided a lot of practical help and were excited for me to be going through the process and just for like the hope of what is ahead, which was really fun. Um, and so, they really worked with me to develop my cover letter and
Mm.
practice my job presentation and kind of prep me for interviews in the ways that they could. Um, and I think that even just their like willingness and excitement to do that was encouraging, of like you're going to do this. You can do it and you are going to go far, It's just like their excitement for me was encouraging.
Mhm.
Um and I think one thing, I didn't believe them as they were telling me, but if these people are willing to bring you out for an in-person interview, they wanna have you, like, I think that as a grad student, we feel maybe very, like, small or insignificant or just, like, silly. It's like, "I'm not smart enough to be here to do this," whatever your thing is. Um, but as I was at these interviews, like, "Wait, okay, they actually want me to interview here. They're not just doing this because they, like, pity me or something." Um, so I think that we can go in with a lot more confidence than we kind of give ourselves credit for. Because also, if you have done enough work over a fairly long period of time to order or to earn a PhD, you've accomplished a lot. So even if see your failures way bigger than you might see your successes or your project didn't end up looking like what you wanted it to, um, I think you have accomplished a lot. And that was encouraging to me to just be able to have confidence to enjoy the interview day instead of, being stressed about what will they think of me? Am I good enough to be here? things like that.
I love that. It is something to enjoy, and celebrate how far you've come.
Right.
That's a great way to look at it. Just a couple more things. Any other, we talked about GWiz, we talked about sort of the trainee affinity groups. Any other resources you took advantage of while you were here, during your PhD that you found helpful, that you would encourage other trainees to consider?
Yeah, definitely those two. I think that also my hub and Geppo was really helpful for me over the years, like working with Eric Vaughn, because I honestly didn't know that I wanted to do a postdoc until it came time for me to apply to do something.
Okay.
So, um, I think he was really helpful in exploring, helping me figure out what was out there and exploring those things and helping me to like network and find connections with the people that they were bringing in. And then the Elaine Smalllock and the writing services were also really helpful, like doing F Club and learning how to write grants and things like that was also very helpful and encouraging that we're, you know, working in the right direction. So those would be another two that I would plug to take advantage of as a trainee.
I know they'll appreciate that. So, what else? Just curious. So, you mentioned Eric helped you kind of discover that postdoc was the route you wanted to go. So, were you just kind of open to anything, industry, postdoc, or
Yeah.
academia? Okay.
And I think I've really enjoyed my time in academia. I like what I do. Um, I enjoyed even like the more administrative side of it, working with GSS and stuff like that. And so that has always been a leaning, I think. But I also had a lot of doubts if I was actually cut out for it or if I would be able to make it, as they say. Um, and so I did a lot of exploring in like science communication or consulting and stuff like that. But ultimately, I've really enjoyed what I do. And so I'm going to keep doing it until I feel like I shouldn't anymore, I guess. Um, yeah. So
Love it.
that was kind of it. And Eric was really helpful in um, kind of giving the pros and cons of what he does on a daily basis as well as other faculty members and the visiting faculty that came that I got to meet through like GWiz were also really insightful. So I think you can never talk to too many people and you never know what seminar or lunch you're going to go to where you really have a key takeaway from that. So I would also encourage people to just keep going to things even though it can become monotonous or tiring or whatever. Like really go and try to engage, because I think everyone has their different tidbits and stories that might be beneficial to you.
Oh yeah. I will say, I'm in marketing and communications, but have attended some GWiz events and, other talks from those, whether they went into science from an academia perspective or they're in industry. I mean, it's far from what I do. I know I talk to you guys about your careers and your career paths all the time, but I find it incredibly helpful. Even we're in two different worlds, in a lot of aspects, but just hearing from folks that have been around the block and like everybody's story is different. You always, like you said, you can always take some tidbit from that and apply it
Yeah.
to your own journey. Um, okay, so last thing for me, we may have already touched on it, but if there's one final piece of advice or one thing we didn't touch on that you want to talk about, the floor is yours.
That's a good question. I think that my like biggest takeaway and encouragement that I would give to people who are applying to a postdoc position would really be that you have accomplished a lot, even though it may not feel like it right now. and you can have confidence in yourself as you go to these interviews and as you go through the process.
All right. Well, Maddie, I will say, I'm so excited for you and what's next.
Thank you.
It's interesting. I feel like we came to Rochester around the same time. I've only been here
Mhm.
coming on 4 years, and I know early on we did some recruitment videos together. Feels like forever ago now, and always, saw you at one GEPA event or another, and you've always been a bright light in the halls of SMD. So you will be missed, but
Oh,
wish you all the best.
thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the latest episode of the Next Step podcast. If you liked what you heard, please share with other members of the University of Rochester community or anyone you think could benefit from these career stories. And we wish you nothing but the best in your own career journey. Until next time.